systems within an individual can lead to the production of creativity when that which is known and has been established is well perfected and mastered in them, so that they have a very good idea and succinct notion of what has already been established into what the exact boundaries are and the flaws and the limitations of the system, so that they can create bridges, connective ideas, mental tools, and ideas to extend the field and the boundary which is already established. But the known phenomenon is only so that they can know what is unknown. Creativity works in that manner in a general or philosophical or metaphysical sense. Despite the physiological parameters and factors that bring it about in an individual, insofar as them needing to have an adequate IQ and a certain disposition and temperament by way of divergent elements within their thought and being prone to divergent thinking patterns as an individual in large networks and loose associations of the brain, fundamentally in one's experience, they do not exist within systems, and they are supposed to act outside of systems and be antithetical agents to what is already established. Creativity is destructive and constructive simultaneously in nature, and it is for these reasons that it is vilified and hated. It is only seen as a metric per se by many people in its monetary advancements, as artists bring in 50% of Western revenue per se, as media produces much of what we make in money, as art galleries, and as Europe is a beautiful frontier and brings people to it by way of just the beauty of its synagogues, by the way of the beauty of its castles and its artwork from the Romantic and Renaissance historicity of it. Art and creativity lead to monetary and fiscal gain per se, but that is the only way it's valued, and it sits, and creativity is the driving engine to that. The only way it is valued, the only reason it is valued though, is because of the gains that it brings, but because it is something that is fundamentally chaotic in nature per se and hostile towards established things. Not hostile insofar as a rebel without a cause, as is typically personified in movies and things, but hostile as in the things of now are incomplete, and they do not appreciate essentially the sentimental values in things. They do not appreciate the creative individual does not appreciate the sentimental values in things if it does not lead to a greater understanding and a fruition of life in expression, and the increasing of our understanding and perceptive capacities towards reality. It does not appreciate anything if it does not extend and continue to proliferate what we understand, see, know, and experience. It's the proliferation and the increase in these things, essentially the generative aspects of life-giving proponents and items of existence and thought and experience that highly creative individuals are about. The thing about the staticness of things is that it does not lead to the numinous agency of things, or noumena, the breath of life that is associated in Genesis, or associated with the sublime, or the general phenomena of the awe-inspiring, because it's fundamentally dangerous to the psyche as it's represented in the Old Testament, is that you could not walk up to the Ark of the Covenant because it may kill you. It could kill you to be in the face of God, or to be in the face of genius or highly creative and seminal things, as in there are things about you or things that you understand or that you know or you hold simple or just spontaneously accept that may need to die, or that things are not per se just okay with being static and stable, that you will have to question and you will have to reinvent and remake things, and that it's a great deal of trouble per se in the simultaneity of the creative aspects of creativity, because with creativity comes destructive elements per se. It's why there is the dancing Shiva, that Shiva is dancing as as it is generative in one hand and destructive in the other hand. That's what those archetypes are trying to express, or those images are trying to express, and that's something that exists within the highly creative individual. Now, per se, in my own personal experience, the thing about the way that science is set up very really now in the school systems is that the very rationally conscientious individuals make it to the top, and the highly intuitive individuals are rooted out, and we try to stamp out and kill creativity, because creativity shows up in individuals who procrastinate. Creativity shows up in individuals who are not necessarily dependable but are far more risk-taking and prospecting in nature. Creativity is a risk-based gain. Highly creative individuals are very risky individuals. They may be making calculated risk, but they make risk nonetheless and are risk-based as individuals, as creativity has a high correlation with the presence of dopamine, and even the agonistic hormone of testosterone. That creativity emerges in certain kinds of individuals, and they care to take risk, and their lives are based on risk. They do not necessarily make what people would consider smart, wise decisions per se, because that's not what they're after. They mess with things, and they explore things, they question things, and turn things over, which can be quite disconcerting to the standard populace and the majority of people. Creative individuals are not nice people. They're not fun to be around. It's not fun, and it's very, for most people, it's very anxiety laden to be struck with what's new and what they don't understand all the time, and that's something that is very tightly linked and associated with highly creative individuals, and that's something that I bring all the time to people, and why I am in some respects always jettisoned or just disassociated with per se. Why people use Einstein's image but don't really like Einstein. The thing is, I say this to people all the time. They say, I hear people at parties and coffee houses think, it would have been wonderful to speak to Socrates. It would have been wonderful to talk to Newton. It would have been wonderful to know Van Gogh. It would have been an amazing thing to know Einstein. Wow, I really wish I could have had a conversation with Madame Curie. I really wish I could have known Shakespeare. I really wish I could have known and experienced these people because they're clothed in such majesty now. But what I think in my head is, no, you don't. You really would have hated that person, because society's tried to kill those people, or largely or marginalize them, or tried to stamp them out. Society Nietzsche lived in hated him fundamentally. You think you like Nietzsche, but you don't know Nietzsche. You wouldn't like Nietzsche. You will assume his ideas and his thoughts and try to dress yourself in his robes and his garbs, essentially the cloak of gold and the robe of solid gold that he's dressed in. You'd assume those things on for your own personal pleasure and benefits and fancies, but Nietzsche probably wouldn't like you, and you probably wouldn't like Nietzsche. You wouldn't like them because the thing is, it's hard for most people to accept this, that you have to be fundamentally different from most people to be highly creative. You either need to have an enormous amount of IQ per se in correlation with some sort of personality disorder, or be made with a certain schema with a high IQ in terms of being highly sensitive, prone to low latent inhibition, or you need to have some sort of down regulation, schizotypal. You need to be something that's different per se from the standard experience, because highly creative people are rare for that reason, insofar that it's hard because creativity is destructive and very anxiety laden, insofar as you need to put a tremendous amount of constraints on yourself. You need to constantly approach what you don't know and what you're uncomfortable with and what most of the world doesn't accept. It's why Nietzsche says, and why it's always and analogize in certain spiritual practices that the road to enlightenment is a very narrow one that many won't walk and can't walk, and the road to perdition is a very wide one, because you only deal with a certain set of parameters and don't really question yourself or seek ultimate understanding or the truth, or continually trying to expand your horizon and experiences, which is fundamental and indicative of the creative person. It's just that this world hates me, and this world hates creativity. It values it at an arm's length distance. But the thing that will be the salvation to this world is the enemy to it at the same time. It's the enemy to the populace. It's the enemy to the bureaucratic structures. It's why Nietzsche and I'm outside, so there's obviously things in the environment that is interrupting this audio. But it's why Nietzsche said that there will come one who will stamp on our formulas and our conception and won't need these things, that he will rise them and make them look cheap and simple per se. And that was part of his conception of the Übermensch, and you get that in why Camus wrote so much about the rebel per se. It was that they were trying to describe the generative Dionysian, partially Christ-like qualities that come in the ingenium, or the genie, or the genius, or the ingenuitive spirit of the creative person. That's what they're trying to describe, and it falls on deaf ears, and they don't get it. I find so often that, people will pick up a textbook and cuddle up with it because it's there, and it's fixed, and it's widely accepted as the consensus. But if it stood in their face, they would completely deny it. People say that they are Christian and they know God, but I think that if Christ was a real person, and if God was real and he came down and he revealed himself to them, they would deny him still. They would deny him still. There are things about what's numinous and what's beyond oneself and their own understanding that is completely frightening per se, because it's not what you understand and not what you know, and why we have so many mythologies and stories about confronting the unknown, and that monsters live in the dark and hide in the dark per se, is because what we don't know and what we don't understand we don't like per se. And that's what people don't seem to accept, and they never want to accept the shadows in themselves and the limitation to themselves and the ways that they are deficient. So anything that is a light per se, or anything that differs from them in any way and shape and form, they want to tear